As I said, I will speak in Portuguese because my proficiency not allowed me to speak in English without reading. Eu fui incumbida pelo professor Ricardo Murichita de fazer a abertura dessa terceira sessão, dessa terceira edição do Seminário IDP-PPED sobre Cooperação Regulatória Brasil-OCDE em Segurança de Produtos, Consumo, Qualidade Regulatória. Eu cumprimento, em primeiro lugar, a organização do evento, que faço nas pessoas da professora Maria Tereza Leopardi, Mello, e do Paulo Coscarelli, mediador dos debates. Eu gostaria, em nome do IDP, de dar as boas-vindas aos convidados que vão participar dos debates de hoje. Em nome do IDP, dizer da grande importância dessa parceria com o Programa de Pós-Graduação em Políticas Públicas, Estratégias e Desenvolvimento do Instituto Econômico da UFRJ, o que mais uma vez me reporta a professora Maria Tereza Leopardi Mello. O tema do encontro de hoje, mais especificamente, essa questão do compartilhamento de diferentes experiências de práticas regulatórias e instrumentos de qualidade regulatória para a promoção dessa interoperabilidade de regimes regulatórios, com vistas especificamente ao enfrentamento desses desafios globais ligados aos acidentes de produtos, de consumo, eu ousaria dizer que é um dos temas mais instigantes do momento para os estudiosos dessas questões relacionadas ao mercado de consumo. Em primeiro lugar, porque nós vivenciamos uma sociedade que, enfim, enfrenta processos ligados a uma economia globalizada e hiperconectada, com a superação das barreiras advindas do binômio espaço-tempo, e que atualmente foi superada pela instantaneidade das informações que o mundo todo passa a ter acesso ao mesmo tempo, em tempo real. No mundo de crescentes áreas de complexidade, rapidez e globalização, há um crescimento na importância da regulação internacional coordenada em relação aos consumidores, exatamente porque são autores leigos nesse mercado internacional, e cuja porta de entrada pode ser um computador, pode ser um tablet, pode ser a televisão, pode ser o celular, pode ser a própria evolução da globalização, pode ser o crescente turismo, podem ser as áreas de livre comércio, processos de integração, enfim, múltiplas, são as portas de acesso ao mercado de consumo internacional, propiciado pela abertura dos mercados, a esse consumidor pessoa leiga. Então, se até um tempo atrás a proteção do consumidor era basicamente restrita aos territórios nacionais, ao território do país, uma questão basicamente interna, hoje não tem como se negar que o consumo extrapola as fronteiras nacionais. E como afirma a professora Cláudia Lima Marques, consumir de forma internacional hoje é típico da nossa época. E esse consumidor leigo não pode ser prejudicado sob o plano da segurança, da qualidade ou da garantia, mesmo até do acesso à justiça, somente porque adquire ou utiliza o produto proveniente de outro país ou fornecido por empresa com sede no exterior. Nós sabemos que o comércio internacional, que no comércio internacional existem barreiras, a barreira da língua, a barreira da falta de informações, a barreira das normas e costumes diferentes, as dificuldades e a insegurança da entrega do pagamento, as dificuldades de garantia, no nível de qualidade no serviço pós-venda, mas essas dificuldades todas qualificam-se como o parceiro contratual, elas qualificam-se e tornam-se exponencialmente mais importantes quando o parceiro comercial é um leigo, quando ele é um consumidor. De outro lado, reconhece que a atividade de regulação é uma decorrência da soberania estatal. E essa, inclusive, pode ser mais uma barreira para a harmonização dessas regras discrepantes entre sistemas regulatórios vigentes nos parceiros comerciais. Dentro desse contexto, a proteção do consumidor, então, realizada por meio de uma regulação coordenada, para além das barreiras regulatórias incidentes sobre o comércio internacional, que propicie uma interoperabilidade dos sistemas regulatórios, se insere no contexto como um vetor de equacionamento desses conflitos pós-modernos, pois representa juridicamente a garantia de um estándar mínimo de segurança e adequação dos serviços e produtos nacionais ou importados comercializados nos mercados abertos de hoje. E os padrões internacionais têm uma importância fundamental na harmonização das regulamentações normativas, visando a uma proteção mais efetiva do consumidor contra os riscos dos acidentes de consumo no mercado internacional. Ou seja, o próprio título do evento, não é, com todas as consequências, não só para o mercado internacional, mas notadamente para o mercado interno e para os estudiosos, né, da proteção do consumidor, principalmente em relação aos acidentes de consumo, enfim. Né, isso já deixa dar uma dimensão da importância do debate que nós vamos ter hoje. Essas considerações introdutórias, elas tiveram só o condão de contextualização, mas de longe, né, sem a pretensão de exaurimento do tema. Né? Portanto, eu creio que o debate deve ser deixado ao cargo dos convidados especialistas, razão pela qual eu passo a palavra para o nosso moderador, Paulo Coscarelli, para a coordenação dos trabalhos, mais uma vez agradecendo e parabenizando pela iniciativa e pela implementação do evento e desse projeto tão interessante, tão importante para todos nós. Muito obrigada.
Obrigado, professora Marília. Thank you for your kind words. Well, good morning. Welcome to the third seminar on Brazil's regulatory cooperation with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and consumer product safety. This event, as Professora Marília has already mentioned, is hosted by the Brazilian Institute of Education, Development and Research, IDP, and by the Postgraduation Program in Public Policies, Strategies and Development, PPED, of the Institute of Economics at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. My name is Paulo Coscarelli, and I'm a career civil servant at the National Institute of Metrology, Quality and Technology, in METRO, a PhD student at PPED, and I will be the moderator of this panel. First, I would like to start by thanking Professor Marília again from IDP, to my advisor, Maria Tereza Leopardi Mello, who probably will join us before the end of the panel. She's now giving class, so you need to wait for her. To my co-advisor, Maria de Fátima Bruno de Faria, and to the coordinator of PPED, Professor Luiz Carlos Prado, for the partnership that made these 3 meetings possible. I would like also to thank our guests, Diego Pizeta from Metro, Miriam Denil from the European Commission, and Richard O'Brien from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, US Consumer Product Safety Commission. Thank you very much for kindly and promptly accepting my invitation. I'm very grateful for this, so thank you. The OECD defines international regulatory cooperation as any agreement, formal or informal, voluntary or legally binding, established between countries to promote cooperation and the design, monitoring, enforcement, or ex post management of regulatory action. Regulatory cooperation is a strategy of the regulatory policy of nations to tackle global challenges through the convergence of regulatory solutions. Given its cross-cutting nature, it connects with other domestic policies, such as the foreign trade policy and the consumer protection policy, which demands from the designers and from those who are responsible for implementing the policies a strategic coordination of public actions to achieve its objectives. My PhD research aims at evaluating the efficacy of Brazil's regulatory cooperation policy in the area of consumer product safety using the OECD's Working Party on Consumer Product Safety as the unit of analysis. This policy is expressed by the Decree 10-109 published in 2019 that introduces the cooperation agreement signed between Brazil and OECD into the Brazilian legal system, making explicit the will of the parties to strengthen their relations and cooperate for the achievement of mutual benefits. For example, in the search for solutions to emerging global issues. According to the theoretical framework that I use in my research, to evaluate the efficacy of a public policy means to verify whether the objectives of the legal rule that materialize it are achieved. In this way, assessing efficacy goes beyond the analysis of the normative content of the decree, considering also its substantive effects on the conduct and perceptions of those to whom the public policies are designed and implemented for. In the third and last edition of the Seminar on Brazil's Regulatory Cooperation Policy with the OECD, Our guests will bring the perspective of the regulators, of those who, in practice, are responsible for the execution of the policies formulated by the highest level of government bureaucracy. Diego Pizeta holds a law degree with a specialization in foreign trade, a master's degree in international relations, and a PhD degree in international political economy. He was a visiting scholar at Columbia University and a visiting researcher at Georgetown University. He is a public servant, and he is currently the General Coordinator of International Affairs of Inmetro. He has previous experience in government and private sectors in foreign trade and international cooperation. Miriam holds a PhD in health law. She is a legal and policy officer in the Product Safety and Rapid Alert System unit of the European Commission's Directorate General for Justice and Consumers. She is also a bureau member of the OECD Working Party on Consumer Product Safety. Richard O'Brien holds a bachelor's degree in mass communication and a master's degree in international affairs. He is a career federal employee with over 3 decades of service, and he draws from a diverse government and private sector background. He worked in trade promotion at the International Trade Administration and at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He is a retired career U.S. Foreign Service officer and served as director for U.S. bilateral telecommunications policy at the Department of State for the East Asian and the Pacific region. He is also a veteran of both U.S. Air Force and U.S. Coast Guard Reserve. At the Consumer Product Safety Commission, he oversees the regulatory agency's international activities aimed at ensuring the safety of imported consumer products. He also coordinates efforts with other U.S. and foreign government agencies on international consumer product safety issues. So each speaker will have up to 15 minutes to make the presentations. And at the end, I will ask some questions to our guests. So let me hand over to Diego Pizeta, then Rich will be the next to speak, and then Miriam. Diego, the screen is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Paul, just wanted to make sure. For me, my image was kind of stuck. It's working well for you.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. Okay, good. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thanks very much, Paulo, Marília, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to be also here with friends, our friends from US, from European Union. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity, a great talk. First of all, Paulo, can I share a little presentation I prepared? Okay.
Yeah, Diego, you should be able to do it by yourself. But if you don't, oh, okay.
Let me know, is it working? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's not in the presentation mode, but we can see it.
Oh, for me, it is. Okay, anyway, if you can see, I think it's good. All right, so I will start just in order to talk a little bit about the Inmetro's international regulatory cooperation. I would start talking a little bit about what Inmetro is. So we are the National Institute for Metrology, Quality, and Technology of Brazil. And we do kind of a lot of activities, I would say. So Inmetro is not only a regulator, it is a regulator on the fields of product safety and legal metrology. But Inmetro is also the National Institute of Metrology of Brazil. It's the national accreditation body of Brazil. It works in other fields like technical barriers and so on. So in some sense, I would say that what is in several countries, or most of the countries, it's split into different institutions. In Brazil, it's all held by Inmetro. Just for a comparison, for example, with the United States, In Metro, we might say that in Metro would be what CPSC, Richard O'Brien institution, but it's also equivalent of NIST, that is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It does all the accreditation work that is in US is done by NIST plus several private entities. And in the field of legal metrology, it does the regulation that in US is done by the states, the different states of the United States. So it's all done in Brazil by Inmetro. So we have examples here of we do regulation like in helmets or toys, in measuring instruments like scales, also technology research in nanomaterials, and so on. This is a little image of the campus, main campus of Inmetro in the state of Rio de Janeiro, where the labs are. We have currently 52 labs. And the mission in the strategic planning defined for Inmetro is to work in this field that has been lately called quality infrastructure. Before, every country kind of had a different concept. But now it's been a while that international organizations and internationally we have been calling it quality infrastructure that brings together all these fields of metrology, conformity assessment, standardization, so on. So then in the international affairs office where I work for, we kind of have an overview of the international activities of all these different departments, different areas of Inmetro, and all the agreements and all the activities that is going on, carried on by all of them. So specifically in the regulatory departments, we fall, and then in the product safety, not talking about legal metrology, because then they have OIML and all different other agreements. Also, I'm not going to mention all the agreements in the metrology and BIPM and so on. So focusing on product safety, international cooperation, I would say that lately we have been working in the multilateral level with OECD. So then specifically with the working party on consumer product safety that Paulo mentioned, but also in the joint meetings with CCP, and also we participate in the regulatory policy committee together. In the first two, we together with the National Regulatory Agency for Telecommunication and the National Secretariat of Consumers, and coordinated by our International Affairs Ministry. In the Regulatory Policy Committee, then the coordination is also done by the Ministry of Economy, and then an area called CI, that is Secretariat under the Secretariat of Competitivity and Productivity, that is kind of organizing more or less, or being more and more a kind of a center of reference for the regulators in Brazil. I think I'll mention a little bit more about that in a while. But then also the work in UNCTAD and this network on consumers safety and health for the Americas. At the bilateral level, we have a long way of cooperation with CPSC, and CPSC has been always there for whenever Inmetro proposed a new line of cooperation, but also with the European Union, and then lately a little more closer with Germany, that has been offering working different projects for us, international regulation cooperation. And then also lately with Korea, CATS and KTL, there is a lab, a public lab, and then more focusing on electric vehicles and electric storage systems to develop the quality infrastructure in Brazil in this area. And also, it's not regulatory, it's more on conformity assessment, but also with NIST in this work that NIST does as kind of a consultant in US for the regulators in terms of conformity assessment. And it's been a great cooperation as well. We also provide or work with cooperation with in different developing countries like Brazil, like Paraguay, Bolivia, mostly in the region, in Latin American region, and in Africa with Portuguese-speaking countries. And then I would say that it's also a kind of international regulatory cooperation. It is through the trade agreements. And then the main one we have is a group under the Mercosur that is only focused on regulatory and technical regulations and conformity assessment. It's called SGT3, where we work on the harmonization of the regulations themselves. Well, we are working on change and improvements on this group. If you want, we can talk a little more later on. But then there is also a group, a permanent group at ALADI that is for the whole Latin America. There are the trade agreements that Mercosur, because Brazil negotiates international agreements, trade agreements with the Mercosur. It's like the European Union. The country doesn't negotiate individual agreements, but we do it through the bloc. And then we have different agreements being negotiated. We just did with the European Union, but there is Korea, Canada, Lebanon, Singapore. Singapore was just closed. Chile was also done. We have some trade agreements, regulatory issues with the US. And I would say that the most advanced agreement we have right now, talking about Brazil, is with US. It's an annex on good regulatory practices that was negotiated, I think, 2 years ago. It's very, very dense, very, very relevant. And also, if you want, we can talk a little more. And the commercial dialogue, that is a dialogue that is also permanent with meetings like Richard knows all the time to talk about regulation, to talk about conformity assessment, accreditation, and so on. And we have the WTO thematic sessions that is always talking about good regulatory practices as well. And then last, Paulo, not to go to last too long, I will mention that in Metro has been under a regulatory framework reform in the last years. And I would say that no doubt it's this reform and this new regulatory framework is also fruit, a very relevant fruit of international cooperation. And then just to mention that this, under the construction of this new framework, of course, all the international cooperation that has been going on over the last decades was taken into account and was kind of working in the mindset of our folks that worked on this reform. But then under the process, formalized process itself, the European framework was studied, the American framework, and the Korean. The Korean more focused on how they deal with technological innovation and regulation. So we believe that this new framework that was launched in February is more flexible, is more trade and innovation friendly. It works like the European model with essential requirements, with presumption of conformity standards, more responsibility for the suppliers. And it comes together with all the improvements that were brought not only for Inmetro, but the whole country by the new economic freedom law from 3 years ago, and all the decrees that implemented this law. And that obliged the regulators to do a regulatory impact assessment, to consolidate all the regulations into simpler and more easy access by the interest parties, to use the international standards, and when the Brazilian standards are kind of well, the new technology, the newest technologies brought by international standards can be used basically, I would summarize like that, to ask the Brazilian regulators to accept the products that use these new technologies. And it has 5 years for implementation. So until 2027. We had a very important regulatory help, I would say, not only cooperation, but help from Europe through the ministries of Germany, the Ministry of International Cooperation and Economy, that provided us consultancy, the development of intelligent smart systems for the regulatory management, and also course about regulatory impact assessment, interaction with the interest parties, and so on. It was a very, very relevant help that we got from Europe and on the development of this new framework. And well, I think that's it. And then looking forward to our conversation. Thanks, Paulo.
Diego, thank you. Thank you very much. Rich, it's your turn.
Hey, bom dia, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk here today and hear also from my colleagues. I should mention, I knew that Professor Marília was saying something nice about you, Paulo, because she smiled when she said your name. So that's a good thing. I'm married to a professor, and when she says my name smiling, I also know it's a good thing. So happy to be here. Some context, maybe, first of all. So about CPSC. We're an independent federal agency, and our mission is to protect the public from unreasonable risks of injury and death from consumer products. When I say an independent agency, by that, I mean that we are not a cabinet agency, although we are within the executive branch for administrative matters. In other words, our pay scale and administrative procedures follow the same as any other executive branch. However, since we're not a cabinet agency and because we are specifically independent by law, it means that policy decisions about product safety are exclusively within the purview of our commission, which is a panel of 5 commissioners, and they vote on policy matters. So our jurisdiction of product areas is the typical kinds of products that consumers use during the day, with a number of exceptions. We don't do any kind of transport. We don't do food. We don't do prescriptions or health products or beauty products that are applied, although a hairdryer, that would be ours. And there's sometimes a little bit of overlap with other agencies. And in those cases, if something happens, we discuss with each other who will take the lead. if work has to be done in a product category. We were created in 1972. I think we're one of the oldest product safety agencies in existence. And our 50th anniversary is next month. So we're looking forward to that really, really big birthday cake for 50 years old. We're also kind of unique in our the way that our architecture is for as a regulator. And I listened carefully about Inmetro's responsibilities. And like Inmetro, our spectrum of authority is quite wide. However, that is with respect to the activities that we undertake. Our focus, however, is on consumer products. So, for example, as far as our spectrum of activities, we create and issue technical regulations and technical guidance. We assist stakeholders in developing voluntary consensus safety standards. We research safety solutions, and we perform forensic analysis on safety incidents. We have our own laboratory. It's just a little under 6,000 square meters. We enforce product safety laws and regulations that fall within our jurisdiction. We do retail surveillance that includes both brick and mortar and internet. And we do port surveillance side by side with the customs people. We obtain the recall of products that need to be recalled, and we arrange for repair, replacement, or refund for those recalled products. We inform and educate consumers about recalls and using products safely. And we educate suppliers worldwide about our requirements and best practices. And that specifically is the area that I'm responsible for, is our international outreach. And we collaborate with foreign product safety regulators to reduce the manufacture and trade in unsafe products. And that's also under my office. And it's what brings us into the area of international cooperation. So I'll move on to that specifically now. Of course, we have a great deal of bilateral cooperation, and similar to Inmetro, we have MOUs with a number of different individual jurisdictions. In the case of Inmetro, I think Diego didn't mention, but for me personally, it's very significant. We had an exchange with Inmetro, and one Inmetro lawyer came and spent several months with us at CPSC. And it was a very good situation, and helped to deepen our relationship between the two agencies. But I'm going to talk specifically now about multilateral. And of course, in our own hemisphere, we're very, very active in the OAS, Product Safety and Health Network. Globally, we're very active in both the OECD Working Party and on UNCTAD's working group on consumer product safety. In the case of OECD, I think I'll just start with a really good example of regulatory cooperation, and that is the Global Recalls Portal. That is available online. For those who are watching, you might want to Google OECD and Global Recalls Portal, and you will come to a web page with a fantastic, well-organized, and very useful collection of recalls from over 50 countries contributing to that. At the moment, after 10 years of operation, there are over 35,000 recalls, and they can be searched and sorted. And for those of you who just love to do research, it has a number of embedded tools that you can use to look at different kinds of products and so forth. The benefits of the Global Recalls Portal from OECD are for regulators, for business, and for consumers. And I'll mention real quickly what those are, because they might not be obvious to some of us. For regulators who don't have a really strong product safety framework in place already, this is source information for products that may be in their jurisdictions and which they might need to act on because a company didn't tell them that the product has a problem. And fortunately, many, if not the majority of the products mentioned also include their unique product identifier, which in the business is called a GTIN, G-T-I-N. And that would tell a regulator if they went to a store and purchased one of these, whether it's the same product that's being recalled and announced on the Global Recalls Portal. So good tool for regulators. For business, also a good tool, because if in your country, there's a business who wants to import a product, they can look on the Global Recalls Portal, and by checking the GTIN, they can make sure that they're not going to get stuck with importing a product that's already been recalled in other jurisdictions and clearly is not safe to be used by consumers. And then for consumers, I think it's kind of obvious. Again, a consumer in a country where maybe the framework for product safety is not so strong, they could look on the portal and see whether a product has been recalled someplace. And again, referring to the GTIN, if it's there, they, if it's listed, they'll know whether it's the actual product or a different model that looks similar, but it's not the same one that got recalled. So that's the portal, and I could talk about it all day, but I won't. I'll just talk about another really good example, and that is the recommendation on consumer product safety, which was adopted by the OECD Council in July in 2020, and that was on proposal of the Committee on Consumer Policy, and in cooperation, of course, with the Working Party on Consumer Product Safety. Now that recommendation outlines the key elements that should be at the core of consumer product safety frameworks. And it covers both the domestic and international levels. And it promotes a consistent approach to product safety rules and terminology across jurisdictions in order to increase certainty, which is important for business, and efficiency for all the stakeholders. Within the recommendation, there is a section number 4, Roman numeral IV, and that is the section on international cooperation. And it specifically recommends that jurisdictions that adhere to the recommendation should work together to enhance international cooperation, keeping in mind the objective that product safety government bodies should be well informed about products regarded as unsafe in other jurisdictions, so that they can, if necessary, take steps to protect consumers in their own jurisdictions. So some of the concepts and the activities discussed in this section, I'll list them for you. I won't go into great detail, but I'll say in advance that based on my experience working now 15 years in consumer product safety, all of these would be highly recommended as activities or tools that a jurisdiction should implement in order to have an effective framework. So that would include information sharing initiatives, both internally with other agencies, such as the Customs Agency, but also externally with those agencies around the world that information may be shared with or can be obtained from. Also, another tool or activity would be joint surveillance and enforcement. Another one would be global awareness campaigns on consumer product safety. Another would be cooperation on collection and analysis of injury data. And also compatibility and alignment of policies and requirements. And on this last point, compatibility and alignment of policies and requirements, I'm going to quickly refer to an example from work that Mexico, Canada, and the United States have done together within our North American cooperation. As anybody who's been in this business knows, if a jurisdiction already has requirements in place that are legal requirements for like technical regulations, aligning among jurisdictions and changing technical regulations or laws, which would even be more difficult, is a tough job. If you want to align, the best time to do it is before significant activity has begun, either regulatory activity or in the voluntary consensus standards world. And among US, Canada, and Mexico, we have several times selected with specific products what we consider to be unaddressed hazards. And our teams have looked at what is a consensus approach to addressing those as yet unaddressed hazards. The first one we did was chargers that you plug into the mains to charge your phone. And we found that there were a number of tests that it would be useful to add to either regulation or standards, whichever is more suitable in the jurisdiction. And having come to a consensus, the three of us proposed to our three different lead agencies that these tests that we had come up with together should be added to the testing required or recommended for these products. So that's a really good example, as I mentioned, about compatibility and alignment of policies and requirements. Now I'd just like to turn to UNCTAD for a minute, if I can. In 2020, UNCTAD agreed on a recommendation on preventing cross-border distribution of known unsafe consumer products. And that was revolutionary because it's the first time that within the UN system there has ever been a significant recommendation on consumer products. And as we all know, if you can limit the manufacture and trade in consumer products, you've solved the problem. So how do you start limiting that? Well, we're now in the implementation phase, and I think success is going to depend on development of effective consumer product safety frameworks within countries. There's not much you can do about preventing cross-border distribution of known unsafe products if you don't know what the products are, or if you have very, very limited powers as a product safety agency. So this kind of flips back to all those areas that I mentioned under OECD. I think it's just talking about OECD in light of the UNCTAD recommendation. I would say the OECD recommendation that I talked about earlier from July 2020, it's a roadmap. It is a roadmap to creating a effective product safety legal framework for a country. So in conclusion, I would just say that consumer products are global. They need global cooperation to minimize the potential for injury or death to our consumers, and that sharing information and best practices and experience are key elements for success in this endeavor. And thank you again for the invitation to share with you today.
Thank you very much, Rich. Miriam. We cannot hear you, Miriam. Miriam, your mic is off.
Obrigada, Paula. Bom dia a todos. É prazer estar aqui e participar dessas discussões muito interessantes. Infelizmente, não vou poder fazer a minha apresentação em português, pois me falta o vocabulário técnico e o meu português está bastante enferrujado, então eu vou mudar para o inglês agora. So, first, it's important to set the scene. I have presentation issues. Can you see my screen? Good. Okay, I think it's working now.
Yeah.
So first, yeah, it's important to set the scene. And so as you probably know, the European Union is composed of 27 member states and more than 447 million citizens. And one of the core components of the European Union is the single market. It means that products that are legally placed on the market in one member state must be free to circulate within the EU. So actually there are three additional countries which participate in the single market in addition to the 27 EU member states. So it's Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein, which appear in green on the map. And what does the European Commission does? Well, it's a mix of executive and legislative power. The European Commission is responsible for initiating EU laws, for enforcing the laws, and for managing the EU policies. So in the single market sector, this is a very important role. So in a few words, I will now present the product safety framework in the EU. So as mentioned in the presentation before, it's true that it really relies on first on the fact that there are some harmonization legislation for some products. So for instance, for toys or electrical appliances. And so legislation is made at EU level with safety requirements. And for non-harmonized products, so all the remaining products, they are covered by the General Product Safety Directive, which acts as a safety net. And this piece of legislation, for which my unit is responsible for, is currently being revised. I will touch upon that in a few minutes. But the core principle is really that all products must be safe. And of course, there are standards both for harmonized and non-harmonized products. In the EU, they are voluntary, but they give a presumption of safety to products that comply with them after they have been published in the official journal of the European Union. So when it comes to enforcement, it's really at a member state level. It's the member states, so French authority, German authority, all the member state authorities that will really check the product, test the product, check at borders. But there are also a lot of actions at EU level. One of them is called the coordinated activity on the safety of products. Here, the idea is really to gather member states authorities to test one particular product, notably emerging new products such as a few years ago, toy slime, or during the COVID-19 crisis, masks and hand sanitizers. But it's also to discuss about horizontal issues, for instance, online market surveillance. So this is a powerful tool actually to align practices and to discuss risk assessments. And of course, another very important element is the rapid alert system for non-food dangerous product, which is called Safety Gate RAPEX. RAPEX was its old name, now it's moving towards Safety Gate, which is more self-explanatory. So here, the idea is that when a member state adopts a measure against a dangerous product, which can be based on a voluntary initiative by an economic operator, or it can be a compulsory order from an authority. All these measures, all these corrective measures affecting a product must be notified in the rapid alert system after a risk assessment is done. And this is circulated after a check by the European Commission to all the other member states, which must check whether the product is also on their market, and then they must adopt follow-up actions. And this is actually also a very interesting tool because there is a public face of this system, which is actually really consulted. We have a very high number of visits every week on this website. So it's both consumers willing to know about dangerous products, but also economic operator businesses who are also looking for products that they should not import or distribute. So when it comes to international cooperation, there are three main strands as mentioned on this slide. So one is with manufacturing countries and mainly China. So we have an agreement with Chinese authorities. We send them specific information on dangerous products of Chinese origin so that they can follow up with a manufacturer or exporter. And the idea is really to address product safety issues at source. There is also a training program ongoing to make Chinese manufacturers more aware about EU norms and standards when it comes to product safety. So the second strand of international cooperation is cooperation with countries which have a similar market. So here the idea is also really to exchange information on the emerging risks and issues, and to compare practices, exchange best practices. And finally, of course, multilateral cooperation, which is the main topic today. So as Rich mentioned, UNCTAD plays a prominent role, but I will now specifically address what we do and how beneficial we see cooperation within the OECD Working Party on consumer product safety. So first, it is an essential forum to discuss about emerging issues and emerging risks. So when we hear about new products, I put the example of the fidget spinner, which was very fashionable a few years ago. So there's always one jurisdiction seeing a problem happening before the other in general. So it's really good to have this forum to be able to exchange and to discuss these emerging product safety trends. But it's also a good forum to discuss more fundamental issues which affect the safety of products, such as the impact of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things on the safety of everyday products, because we know now that a product as simple as a toothbrush can be connected and smart. So it's also a very interesting forum to discuss these issues, because in a single jurisdiction we might not have enough data, and sharing this data and knowledge is very useful and relevant. So the second element is about sharing. Sorry, I have issue. Okay, it's sharing best practices, then getting inspiration also from other jurisdictions. So for instance, I used the example of the Product Safety Award, the EU Product Safety Award. This initiative was actually first started in Japan, and we thought it was a very interesting idea to also hear and promote best practices by the industry to go a step further their obligations for the safety of consumers. So we have now in 2021 the second edition of this awards, and it's very interesting to see the very different range of initiatives that are taken by the industry to make products safer and consumers safer. So this is really something that we got inspiration from when listening to Japanese colleagues, and this was also thanks to this this international forum. And in turn, we also promoted the EU Product Safety Pledge, which is a voluntary commitment which we facilitated at the European Commission level. And it's a commitment by online marketplaces, major online marketplaces active on the EU market, to go further their legal obligations. So they commit to consult the SafetyGate RAPEX website, to take down product listings identified as dangerous within 48 hours. So this is a comprehensive and very interesting list of commitments. And also via the OECD Working Party on Consumer Product Safety, it was possible to share our experience with this tool, with this voluntary tool, and it has inspired other jurisdictions, so notably Korea and Australia, which have adopted similar pledges. And now the Working Party has also issued a communique to encourage the adoption of such product safety pledges. So why is it not working? Yes. Which perfectly summed up the recommendation on consumer product safety. So I will just add that for us, when we were revising the General Product Safety Directive, which I mentioned at the beginning, it was a great source of inspiration. I mean, we could really also do a kind of checklist to check whether the elements of these recommendations are in some form or another in the EU legislative framework. And the work also that the OECD has been doing on recalls, so policy guidance on recalls, has been really informative and important for us. We have complemented it also with some work at EU level, but it has helped us drafting a whole new chapter in this proposal for a general product safety regulation addressing product safety recalls. And yes, again, this we have drawn inspiration from the OECD instruments developed in this sector. So, of course, another extremely important of the work of the OECD in the field of product safety awareness raising campaigns, and the multiplying effect that these campaigns have when jurisdictions all over the world communicate about the same topic. It is very, very interesting. And also the preparation process is stimulating and thought-provoking, because we can really see how different jurisdictions communicate differently and about an issue, and finding common messages is also a very interesting approach. And finally, I know that Rich addressed very comprehensively the Global Recourse Portal's benefits, but I just wanted to mention one additional element which is extremely important, and which relates also to what Paolo said in his introductions about considering the effect of the legislation, looking at the enforcement side. So at the moment, we are really looking at ways to make online market surveillance more effective, because we really believe that this is a very important way to go. And when we see that some products are tested, so there is an investment to make, for instance, chemical tests and so on, we have to make sure that products which are found dangerous are not available anymore for no consumers. So it's really important to make sure that we clean the market from all the identified dangerous products. So for this, we have developed a web crawler, an EU surveillance web crawler, which for the moment works with the data of the SafetyGate RAPEX system. So it identifies products which have been found dangerous, and it screens the web to see whether these products are still for sale. And for this project, the OECD Global Recourse Portal is, of course, the next step. It would be to use this huge database to check whether a product that was found dangerous in one jurisdiction is still for sale on the EU, and then it also really shows the importance of gathering data and having data in one place, because this can really feed powerful tools that will help authorities with market surveillance and making market surveillance more efficient. And last but not least, I just wanted to invite you all to the International Product Safety Week that will take place in 2 months, from the 14th until the 17th of November. So it will be really a place to discuss and exchange about product safety issues, challenges, and opportunities with regulators, stakeholders from all over the world. So if you are not allowed to or able to travel, of course, it will also be possible to follow online, but you're also warmly invited to Brussels. So thanks a lot, and look forward to our discussion. Muito obrigada.
Miriam, I would love to go back to Brussels. And unfortunately, I'll try to attend the event just online, but who knows next time. Thank you again, Diego, Rich, Miriam, for your presentations. They were very clear. They were very inspiration. Your presentations, I believe that the world is inspiration, because we know that we work with different countries. Diego make the presentation talking about the Inmetro's experience in regulatory cooperation. We learn a lot. We share a lot of information. We know that information is the best tool to improve our techniques, our practice. But we also know that the information is available, but sometimes it's not used. We cannot explore the potential of the information at the maximum level, you know. So based on this, on this, in my words, I'd like to make some questions to you that I have formulated based on the literature that I use as a reference to my research. So I make some questions. I formulated some questions I'll make to you, and I'll let you speak freely about your experience based on what that I will ask. So the first question is, in your opinion, what effects a regulatory cooperation policy in the area of consumer product safety should foster at the national level? So we are talking about regulatory cooperation. You talking about your what is the regulatory cooperation policy that you have in your countries, but there was expectation. When it was formulated, what are the expectations on your regulatory cooperation policy?
Oh, acho que teu microfone está fechado, cara.
Okay. Who wants to be the first? Rich, can you talk about it?
I should say now, but actually I should have said at the beginning that anything that is not specifically a factual statement would be my opinion and wouldn't necessarily be the opinion of our commission, the panel of our 5 commissioners. So especially the way you phrased this question, I'm going to give you my opinion. And I think that a really useful effect would be a realization that consumers are better served by regulators who can share their experience with each other, and also appropriate lessons learned to improve outcomes in their own jurisdictions. So I can give you a good example of that. The CPSC sent an engineer to Japan to look at their child activity laboratory. And it was an amazing setup. And you would probably guess that within the activity laboratory, multiple services would be wired with sensors. So if a child touched it, and so forth. Yeah, all of that. This is Japan, after all, and they're very good at this. So we sent an engineer to Japan to look at this laboratory to get ideas on how we could better predict children's behavior when they're presented with certain kinds of play opportunities. And I just think this is an excellent example of better serving our consumers, I should say our taxpayers. We didn't have to reinvent what Japan was already doing. We could learn from it, and we could, I should say, appropriate their experience and use it for our own work. So I hope that's a good answer and a good example.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else? Miriam, Diego?
Oh, well, again, as Richard said, I'll give my personal opinion, my personal view. Right? And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, in international affairs, we are not working directly with the regulatory international cooperation. We kind of oversee all the cooperation that goes on in the different departments, including this one. It seems to me that the main benefit we have been having in Metro with international cooperation over the years has been the word you mentioned at the beginning, inspiration. I think for those representatives of Metro that participate in the discussions in OECD, UNCTAD, or in the bilateral or regional projects of cooperation, they have access to the cutting edge discussions of the experience of what have been working or not, or the most advanced examples of counterparts in other countries. But then bringing that, and I think several times what I see is that they understand their hearts and minds are caught by these experiences and these insights they get. But then making that happen in their reality in Brazil, and more particularly in Metro, is sometimes not as easy. And I think every country has different issues, different difficulties and problems. But one problem that I see in our case, in this time I have been following that, I would say that is stability. For the time we have more stability in terms of political stability and change in even technical direction, administration in Metro, we have been able to bring more this international experience that we got from international regulatory cooperation. Times where we have more instability are more difficult for that. And then so this is one example. I think there are more factors, but from my point of view, this not to talk too much, this has been one of the main ones that makes it difficult for the Metro participation in these international discussions to be really incorporated in our reality.
If I can add to that, I think I fully agree with what Rich and Diego said, and it's also my personal view that I will express now. So, as I mentioned in my presentation, international regulatory cooperation really enables us to exactly get inspiration, to share best practices. But sometimes when it comes to legislative changes that we see are needed, then it's also not in our hands, and you have to wait for the political momentum. So it might take, so for instance, the General Product Safety Directive that I mentioned dates back from 2001, and we're revising it now. So we are lucky that now we could get the input and all the knowledge and the state-of-the-art information, but we had also this 10 years ago, but it was not the right time also to revise the legislation. So it's always, yes, it's always also a way to take in this knowledge and this information, and to see in which way it can be applied in our jurisdiction at our level. So it can be also through other ways, through awareness raising campaigns, through projects, but I see it also as one of the challenges to have it combined with the political agenda and the momentum.
Probably your answers have already answered my next question, because when I asked you about your expectations about your domestic, about your national regulatory cooperation policy, my next question will be with regard of the practical effects of this policy. So you have expectations, and you mentioned about the expectations about your national cooperation policy, regulatory cooperation policy, and based on these expectations, my next question will be: these these expectations are being fulfilled, in your opinion? So by your answers, I can, if I can say, you can correct me if I am wrong, but based on your expectations, this policy is not being fully fulfilled because of some aspects that are that every country has its own aspects, political aspects, economical aspects, and I know very well what Diego mentioned about the reality sometimes is not so that the reality that we have sometimes is not the best scenario to implement some actions that we would like to. So am I correct in making this statement that your expectations are not being fulfilled?
Oh yeah, I would answer, if I might start, maybe answering yes and no, because not of course none of them are being fulfilled, but some I think they are. So for example, yeah, when I look at this, even not being an expert, but when I look at this new regulatory framework that I mentioned of Metro, I think it wouldn't be like that if it was not for the international regulatory cooperation. It is much more aligned with the good regulatory practice or foreign regulatory practice, whatever way we can call them. But I think if our people had not been in touch with people from Europe, from US, from other countries, this regulatory framework we are reforming would not be like that, and would be different. I can't say if it would be better or worse, but it would be different. And I'm sure, I have no doubt, it is like that, and it is more aligned to good regulatory practice, more flexible, more open to innovation, more open to trade, and so on, because of this contact we had. Of course, I think we could have been doing much more in terms of initiatives and policies, using tools that have been used for a long time now for other regulators and that are proved to be very efficient. And we are not yet. So definitely we could have been doing more, but I think like for a lot of things, including structural change, international regulatory cooperation has been very relevant and fruitful.
Add something, if that's okay.
Okay, of course. Go on.
When I came to CPSC 15 years ago and began to meet my international colleagues, my foreign colleagues, there was no question that there was interest. I would even say, strong desire to share experiences and so forth. But at that time, there was no formal platform for doing that. And I think it's remarkable, really, that in 15 years, and I'm going to say in only 15 years, because as things happen typically in a bureaucracy and especially internationally, 15 years is not a real long time. And within 15 years, the OECD reestablished its long dead working party on consumer product safety. And it not only came alive, but it came alive super active very quickly. And also within that time frame, and this is only what now, 5-6 years ago at the most, UNCTAD stood up a working group on consumer product safety, which is the only totally global, universal platform for product safety authorities. And again, from the moment it was created, there was energy, strong energy, and it was amazing. The recommendation on cross-border distribution, for example, that came about in under 2 years. And that is, that goes beyond amazing. I think it's called miraculous. So I think there's a lot to be happy about in the international context, and particularly the multilateral context. It's not perfect, and there's still a lot to be done, but it's very satisfying, I have to say. As someone who's participated in it, I can say that.
If I may, it's also very interesting to see, I think, how active the community is in the product safety field and eager to exchange and to participate. And I think for this specific field, it's very relevant to have such global exchanges and cooperation. It's that I remember Professor Maria mentioned in her introduction that supply chains have become global, and it's very seldom that a product issue will be isolated in just one country and not affect the rest of the world, or it might be a really isolated issue. But a lot of the major safety issues that we see right now are shared by other jurisdictions. So it's also a field where there might be less so subjective interpretation based on the different regulator and jurisdictions, and there's really eagerness to share and to learn from each other. So it is a good, also an important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you. Another question. You mentioned a lot about the benefits of the international regulatory cooperation, but in OECD, one of the publications of OECD published in 2013 mentions that it's difficult to measure the quantitative effects of the international cooperation. The publication focuses on the qualitative effects. So we know the benefits. You mentioned a lot about the benefits, but probably we have challenges regarding to international cooperation. It could be better than it is today. In your opinion, what are the main challenges regarding international cooperation, regulatory cooperation? Anyone? Miri? You smiled, your turn.
Still reflecting on this. Well, for one, yeah, to start, probably the data and the need for data to also show the importance of the field and how cooperation can be a win-win situation for all participants. So you mentioned this difficulty to have to measure the quantitative effects. It's true that if you share information with the partner jurisdictions, which allow you to withdraw a product, a dangerous product from the market, there is potentially a very high gain, but it's very difficult to measure it because it's both it can be a life saved in terms of workforce, hospital costs saved, but this is always the difficulty, also the cost of prevention and the accidents which have not happened. So there is definitely work also some narrative also to be found to really make tangible the benefits of international cooperation. So yeah, I would say first probably this data, and of course the second element would be that there are different approaches, different regulatory systems. So the interoperability is not always easy to achieve. We've seen it with the global recourse portal when there was this issue to merge data in a single portal, because we might first not all cover the same kind of products. We of course don't have the same data feeds in our databases. So in order to cooperate efficiently, to create meaningful data exchanges, you need to find interoperable solutions and to find common grounds. So this also requires some investments.
Mention something about quantifying also. Not so much, I think, internationally, but you know, it all goes back to what can each jurisdiction bring to the table. So there's a strong domestic, nation for everything that we do internationally, and a key challenge for many countries, maybe most countries in total in the world, is the lack of recognition by legislative bodies that product safety is extremely important to sustain development of a consumer economy. In the United States, I'll give you this quantitative example here. The yearly economic drag from injuries related to unsafe consumer products comes to about $1 trillion, $1 trillion US dollars. And that works out with our population, that works out to about $2,800 per person. Okay, so now let's take that $2,800 and put it in a global perspective. That's equal to the entire per capita GDP of more than 30 countries. So there are over 30 countries in the world where the per capita GDP doesn't reach the level of our per capita drag from unsafe products. Now, why is that important? Because if you're looking at the per capita impact in a country like the United States with a well-developed product safety system, what is the relative impact in a country that has very little of a product safety framework in place? And at a relatively low GDP, how much of the GDP is being wasted from product safety injuries, deaths, and so forth? It's something that I can't quantify, but I can tell you that if it hits the United States as badly as it does with a well-developed framework, the impact in a developing country must be huge. But many of these countries, their legislatures still don't recognize the importance of product safety as an element in economic development. And I think that holds back a lot of progress internationally. So I just mentioned that, and I think governments need to understand just how important consumer product safety is at all levels. Personal, to the person who's injured, to communities, and to their economies. And I should mention that the OECD Working Party's recommendation should help in that regard. But governments need to, first of all, understand what's in it for them. And, I'm a civil servant. I don't tell my Congress what to do. And you don't tell yours. But there's a message out there somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I Paulo, maybe would just add, pointing out three points. One that I think after pandemic has been very, very interesting and relevant, I would say, there is the participation, not only in the forum that discuss regulatory, the national regulatory cooperation, but in other, as we see that in other forums, that this possibility of participating by virtual means, not necessarily having to travel to the international events or discussions and meetings, is opening up the opportunity for not only more countries, but more people from the countries to join and see what is going on and learn and maybe share. Right? So this is, I think this is a kind of a little revolution that is going on in terms of participation, mostly looking from the perspective of developing countries. A second is like local realities, as we mentioned several before and now as well. Like I feel that countries like US or Europe, they have been there when we asked for cooperation, not only in this international forum, but bilaterally. You know that whenever we were talking to Rich and asked the CPSC that we wanted to share experiences in, I don't know, in regulation or in market surveillance or in how they structure and run their labs or whatever, they were always open to share and to help us. So I think that the problem is when we come back and then to implement that in our realities. Institutions are not so mature, I would say. If you look at the institutional point of view, or pointing differently, the level of matureness of institutions is different. And then that makes a huge effect on the implementation of what we bring back from this cooperation. And the third point is data to share. I think we lack a lot of work and density in terms of not only working to have the data in our countries, in developing countries, but sometimes we have some data and how to work with them in an intelligent way, or putting intelligence over the data. Because I think that if we use the data we have and we work to collect more data, not only will we be able to share internationally more dense our reality and then how we can grow up together, but we could, in the sense of what Rich just said, we could have more influence internally too, over the legislators, over the government, to show their reality and then to show that something has to be done to protect the consumers more efficiently, and then bringing all these experiences and good practices to be implemented. So I think data is definitely a very, very relevant point that we should put more focus on here, at least.
Thank you. If I understood well, this lack of knowledge of the legislators about the quantification of the problems related to consumer product safety, this Diego mentioned, this lack of the different levels of maturity of the institutions of each country. Do you believe that, if I understood well, this could be this could impact in the commitment of the country to implement new practices or better practices on consumer product safety? Am I correct in my interpretation of your statements and in your positions? And would you like to add something to the, because my concern here is about the level of the commitment of the country. We go to WPCPS, we go to UNCTAD working group on consumer product safety. We go there, we share knowledge, we learn a lot. When we come back to our countries, we tackle different difficulties to implement this information. Or so, in your opinion, what are the main internal and external problems related to the level of the commitment of the countries to implement what we learn, what we share in regulatory cooperation?
I go back to my point, and I'll just make a picture. You're on a ship, and the captain says the ship doesn't go very fast, and I need the engineering department to make the ship go faster. And the guy in charge of the engine says, "Hey, if you give me, a bigger budget, I can get a bigger engine, and the ship will go faster." But the guy who's in charge of the structural portion of engineering, he says, we've got a really big hole in the side of one of our compartments, and that creates an incredible amount of drag. Maybe we could patch that hole, and we'd pick up another 7 or 8 knots. So the engine guy it's completely understood. Everybody knows you get a bigger motor, the ship goes faster. They don't totally understand immediately that the hole in the side of the ship, I mean, after all, the ship isn't sinking because that compartment is sealed. They don't immediately understand that if we fix that hole, the ship will go faster. And the issue is to make sure the captain understands. Captains like bigger motors though, you know, and so you have to convince them that, yeah, bigger motors are good, but if we could fix that hole in the side, we'd go a lot faster, bigger motor or not. That's the issue, bringing that understanding to people. And when it's something they can't see, you know, when they can't see it, they don't understand it. So I think the solution is to somehow bring that message home.
Nice image, which very telling. But to complement, so well, on the external and internal obstacles to implementing and what we hear, the good ideas that we share during the meetings, I would say, well, of course, funding is an issue. And also the reality of an administration, so planning ahead, having really activities and projects planned for a period of time might make it difficult to quickly adapt and change priorities if we hear something. So there might be some buffer, but it's also always a challenge. So there might be a delay also, or if this is implemented at all. But I think when it comes to new issues and new discussions that we hear, then the obstacles are not that many. It's this is something that we really see as being picked up quite quickly. If we say other jurisdictions have experienced this issue, then the discussions we have with member states and with our hierarchy also tend to show that this is very quickly addressed. So for me, there are really two different kind of takeaways that you can have from meetings. The first one is something that depends on budget, or also, as I mentioned before, on legislative change, which might not be in our hands. But the other kinds of takeaway, which is, oh, I heard that this is becoming an issue, or this might be interesting. This type of information circulates quite quickly and easily picked up, I would say.
Right. Paul, and I was thinking, I read that, I think, because you mentioned that things both internationally and internally, sometimes external or international agreements also have the power to kind of force some change. So I was thinking, for example, Brazil now is under a process of adhesion to OECD, right? And that not only on the regulatory side, but OECD is so huge. So in so many aspects of Brazilian life and government, I would say, a huge effort has been made for the country to comply with the requirements of this organization. And a lot of internal difficulties or problems, and then you name on the fields, environmental, regulatory, trade, taxation, whatever. Like, the country has been having to work a lot in a lot of the problems that for decades were there without a solution. So this is one example. The other is, for example, this agreement we just signed with the US that has an annex on good regulatory practice that, for example, now Brazil has the commitment of making a regulatory impact assessment. Okay, that was already in the law from starting from last year, but it's an international agreement as well. A mechanism for surveillance and coordination of the regulators in Brazil that we never had, and we missed that a lot. This thing of every 2 years to publish the regulatory agenda for the next 2 years. We also didn't have that. 60 days for comment, only website for all the regulations enforced in the country, and so many commitments that are improvements, definitely are improvements, and come from international agreements, international commitments. So I think external commitments help. And just a last point about internally, because internally we talked more before, but about this point of data that I mentioned, well, I truly believe that artificial intelligence is coming and big data analysis is coming to make a revolution, of course, in all the aspects of the life, but also for the regulation on product safety. Bringing together information from, because now the data are much more available in every corner. So bringing together all this information, not only from the country, but abroad, and from internet, because internet these days are getting so richer and richer in terms of data, bringing all this together and being able to point to the regulator, look, this product, this supplier from this country, to be much more focused on the way they regulate the market surveillance, so on. So just to point out that this might have a huge impact also in the internal discussions from now on.
Oh, all that you have said sounds great to me, because you know, Diego, Brazil, we are in a path regarding to the accession process of Brazil to OECD. I strongly believe that it can help us to implement some governmental actions that can improve some of our practices. You know that Brazil has his own database, probably not so, how can I say, specific like NICE in US, probably not so so how can structure like the safe gate that you have in European Commission, Miriam, but we have the data switch. We have the Ministry of Health coordinates the data switch, and the injuries and deaths associated with unsafe products is considered a public health issue by the WHO. So probably this lack of comprehension of all these actors, probably we need to coordinate this understanding that the injuries and deaths associated to unsafe products is a public health issue, is a productivity and an economic issue. So this is a social issue that must be understood as well as this by these different actors to coordinate actions to get to get us in a better place that we are now. So saying that, I would like to thank the speakers again, the guests, my friends, Rich, Miriam, Diego, for your brilliant expositions, your brilliant informations that you bring to us. So it will help me a lot. Particularly speaking, it will help me a lot in my research, and probably, and I would like to get this opportunity to tell you or to ask you if I need to talk to you again about my research, to get more information, to dip some some information that you bring to us, but we cannot explore a lot, so deep as I want to, but I would like to reach you again, to talk to you again about the issues that we discussed here today. So thank you a lot for being here, to accept the invitation, and to your brilliant lectures. Thank you very much. And I'll let hand over to Marília again. To our hosts, my advisor is here, Maria Tereza Leopardi Mello, and I will let hand over to our hosts, Professora Marília e Professora Maria Tereza. Thank you very much.
Well, once again, I would like to thank, on behalf of the IDP, today's guests, and congratulate once again Professora Maria Tereza and Paulo for the initiative of the event. It was a very productive morning. It's not the issues that I researching here in academy, but it was very, very, very important and interesting to hear some of the views of the regulatory experts. I wish you all a great rest of the week, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again for the invitation.
Muito obrigada.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Tereza, would you like to add something? Your mic is off.
No, thank you for the speeches, and excuse me for the late.
No problem at all, Tereza. Thank you again, you all. Hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye.
We will reach out anytime, Paul, you know that.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Great to see you, Rich. Great to meet you, Miriam.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.